with the best father and son team on the internet. It's time for Homie and the Dude.
What is up, everyone? This is Homie and the Dude, the father and son MMA and TTRPG podcast, and the destination for the best NPCs in all the planes, the universe, the multiverse, the earth, everywhere. We are super, super excited to have a member of the TTRPG community, probably a senior member of the TTRPG community that's brought us into the fold, so to speak. So really, really grateful to have you on the show today. But this is Emil from DoubleDM podcast. Emil, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's actually an honor. It's an absolute honor. It's actually you were one of the first people that when I took over the Twitter and we started diving into TTRPG, you were one of the first accounts that we followed, and just been loving your stuff since like the beginning. Really, really a big fan. And also as a novice DM of only having been a DM for like a year and a bit now. A lot of your stuff has helped me grow and helped me learn and helped me progress. So it's been a pleasure enjoying your content from afar. How's your week been, man? Have you anything wild happened in any sessions this week so far?
Well, just yesterday I had a session. It was it's the first session of the last chapter of our campaign, of our 8-year campaign.
Wow.
I started TTRPGs with that campaign, and we're going to finish that in 2 months or something. I don't know. We just walked through a portal into a certain basically demi-plane of lizard folk and dinosaurs.
As you do.
Yeah. That's how TTRPGs work, right?
Exactly. Dude, let me ask you a quick question. So first session of the last chapter of an 8-year campaign.
Yeah.
So how many chapters have there been across the 8 years?
We are calling this chapter 30.
Whoa.
Wow.
And each chapter is between 1 and I think up to 11 or 12 sessions. But those sessions varied a lot in length. There were sessions that were like only 4 hours. Especially now going into the last chapter of the campaign, we switched to 4 hours a week. But before that, we basically played once a month for 12 hours, 16 hours.
Wow.
Wait. So one session for 12 to 16 hours?
Yeah. Obviously, there were breaks in there.
Wait. You can't reply like that. You can't just be so casual about it. That's insane.
It is.
Are people like taking like naps? Is there like a nap time break? You got like a 1/3 and then another third and like.
Well, we that wasn't even the biggest session we had. The biggest we met up at Friday at like noon after school, because this was like when we were like 16 years old or something.
Yeah. Okay.
And then played until midnight, went to sleep at that friend's place, slept, woke up, played again. Then had a barbecue for like 3 or 4 hours, 4-hour break, and then we started again for a few hours, slept, started again, and played a few more hours in the morning on Sunday, and then went home.
Amazing. Wow.
Important thing is never doing that again.
Thanks for watching this episode. We really appreciate you supporting Homie and the Dude.
Please hit us with the Holy Trinity, like our Facebook page, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and follow us on Instagram. Just search @Homie and the Dude. It all really helps.
That breaks you.
It's a good point, really, because you seem to be pretty regular in your games. There's a real commitment to this current campaign. It seems like you've gone from once a month now to every week. And, you talk with Niels about all aspects of, your session zeros and all this stuff coming through. There's an aspect potentially of DM, I don't know what you want to call it, DM overwork or DM burnout or anything like that. Do you experience anything in that area?
Yeah, even regularly enough, I would say. It's especially after each session as a DM, when I have my campaigns, I feel a little burnt out. I feel stressed after running the session for like 4 to, I don't know, 6, 7 hours, maybe sometimes even. There is a lot of social work and social stress that goes into running a session sometimes, and sometimes after session I need an hour or 2 to cool down, maybe have a good meal, or just go take a nap, or even go directly to sleep, because my social batteries are low after that. And but then there also becomes the problem of how much prep I put into this, or how much I just have to do in a session. Sometimes I have to talk a lot, and that exhausts my mouth, my facial expressions. And so, yeah, it's pretty regularly that after a session, I just have to cool down for an hour or something. But sometimes there are periods where I'm like, I can't do TTRPGs for 2 weeks straight. I just can't. I just need to shut my brain out of this creative drive sometimes, and just do simple stuff for me, and then pick back up. I canceled sessions over this because I didn't feel good enough to run, and said, hey guys, this won't work. I won't be able to bring my A game or even my B game. We should reschedule this to next week or something. And my players were always supportive of that, right? They always said, okay, yeah, no problem, man. Thanks for trying, but you don't have to push yourself, because it's supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
Why should I burn myself out over fun?
Yeah. And do you know what? I'm right there with you. When when I finish a session, it's like a high adrenaline peak for me for like an hour, maybe 2 after the session. And I'm like riding this high, and then suddenly I just crash really hard. And like the next day I'm a little bit of a vegetable as well. Like I find myself like pottering around, like coming in and doing like Homie and the Dude stuff and trying to like write. And I'm like, I can't. I'm like, my spelling as a dyslexic is already bad, but like it's even worse after doing a session, you know. And I find, yeah, that burnout is definitely a thing. Now, do you find as well, because I know you definitely do you play in any campaigns at the moment as well? Do you find you get similar burnout when you play, or not as much?
I would say sometimes yes. Sometimes, especially, for example, yesterday, we had this session. It was supposed to be a little bit more of an introduction to this new world we're in right now, to this dinosaur jungle and stuff. And it was a lot, actually, I would say. It could also be that I had to work before and basically had to rush to session to get on time. But after the session, I basically went home and flopped instantly into the bed and slept for like 9 hours or 10 hours. And yeah, I was a little bit burned out after the session. Player burnout is a thing that also happens. I think it just happens less because players, in my opinion, need to bring less to the table than a DM.
Yeah.
Though I wouldn't say that player burnout is anything less, right? Burnout is burnout, in my opinion, as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned as well, almost like a DM, it's an athletic event. You know, you've got physiological drains. You said if I'm talking too much, like there's actually implications to my face, to my jaw, to my vocals as I'm speaking for 4 to 6 to 8 hours. So that's a real thing.
Also depends how physical you are. If you're a very physical dungeon master who's up on their feet, you know, acting things out and doing a lot of hand gestures and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, it ends up, you sweat.
Yeah, it's a workout. So I think that leads me to just a curiosity. If you are a type of DM that talks a lot, then you would have more, I guess, more implications on your vocals. If you tend to want to lean into a more interactive style, then the players are taking a little bit of the load, or a lot more of the load. Where do you sit with that? Like, if we had ratios, are you more of a I'm going to lead with a lot of narrative, or do you sort of add a little bit of narrative and let them kind of fill in as they go?
I would say that's probably like a 60-40 them and 40% me. I present a lot of, for example, in one of my campaigns, I present the story beats and let them figure out what that has to do. But why I'm saying 60-40 and not like 80-20, which probably a lot of people could say as well, is because my players specifically asked me, can you give us clearer hints or something? Or can you give us clearer what we should do? Some people don't like this. Okay, the noble was robbed. What do you do? They want to have some clearer hook, like they were robbed by this dark cult. That's something you find out instantly. And that hooks them way more. And one of my players asked me, could you make it a little bit more clearer why we are chasing this, why we should go after this? And I'm like, yeah, sure, if you ask me, no problem there. And that's why I switched to that. In the beginning, that campaign was probably more 80-20 for them and me, and it didn't really work. So I switched it up. And yeah, now it's more, I present to them a compelling narrative that they can choose to follow, but I have backups prepared, or I can make up backups for them easily if they want to. But also what's very important is we talked about it in session 0 with them. Sometimes it's totally okay for me to say no to them to go in that direction. When they want to go somewhere, I can just say, well, guys, I have that not prepared. Do you really want to do this? Why do you want to do this? Sometimes it's just on a hunch, and I'm like, that hunch shouldn't even be there. So there was miscommunication. I should clear that up before you go there, because like nothing annoys players more than when they go somewhere and don't find anything. If the journey somewhere and the place they are in is meaningless.
Yeah, I hear you. And you know, it's really interesting you say that, because I know a lot of like DMs that I've seen out there, you know, spouting shit on the internet, will very much say, you know, like, if your players turn this way and you don't have it prepared, you've got to go full improvisation mode. You've got to start pulling out of your ass the most incredible story that's ever been written, you know. And I really like, you know, that level of communication that you've put in with your table within your session 0. And you know, it's interesting. I'll tell you something hilarious. So for the table that I'm currently running, we have it's like kind of like, I guess, my like family group. So I have my parents, my girlfriend, her sister, and a couple of high school friends of mine. And we all come around and play, and it's very relaxed and it's very chill, and everyone's very nice with each other. But we didn't have a session 0 because at the time that I started running it, no one told me that session 0s were a thing. So as a new DM, I had no clue. So we just dove into it, and it meant that the time that it took them to progress with role play was a lot longer. The amount of time that we got our like rhythm between DM as a player like took a lot longer. Literally the other day, I started a session for some of the people who work for us here at Homie and the Dude. And we did like a really good session 0 that was like really nice and in depth. And instantly, like we came away and we were like, wow, the level of role play from a bunch of new players who have never even played D&D before, the level of difference and the level of like cohesion and understanding, like way that they worked with each other and stuff. And again, also just the respect that I held as a DM and that they carried in like the etiquette around the table. It was just massively different, and from the get-go. So it was it's one of those things that session 0s truly are like one of the, you know, golden rules of D&D. You cannot not have a session 0. But I really like the way that you've done that, and I think, you know, like you said, that cohesion is really nice between you and your players. I wanted to ask, you're running this for 8 freaking years. That's like wild. Do you find yourself, you know, wondering what this could have been like as a stream? Where you guys might have been if you had been recording this for 8 years, and where this plot may have taken you?
Ooh. One thing I will say is we thought a lot about maybe recording the sessions, not for the internet, but for ourselves, and just for us. There is actually, and I'm gonna come out and say this, I think a few people of my group will watch this or hear this. We have written recaps of each session, and not like a few notes, but really cohesive recaps that stopped at session 18, 19, something like that. Yeah. That's when we kind of stopped, because it took longer and longer to do that, and suddenly we didn't really do it anymore because we didn't need to. And there is so much stuff that happened in these sessions that, I mean, one of the biggest things I can think about is us standing on a bridge before a big town, defending the town against an elemental water dragon that we froze in place by an ice spell, and then my character riding on the dragon, shooting that ice to pieces with my bow. Like, that moment alone is so much. There was so much build up to that as well. We blew up a fucking castle before for that, and there was so much stuff that happened before that as a build up, and especially with this 8-year running campaign, I don't think anyone would have watched that from the beginning to the end with us, because 8 years of content is a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much stuff in that campaign. I mean, it's also the first that I started playing in. So, like, the character I'm playing, just played yesterday, is still my first character ever.
Wow.
And
amazing.
I was about to ask you how many player cycles you guys have gone through, like how many times you guys have rewritten and like brought in new characters because people have been dying out. But the fact you're still playing your first character must be kind of nice, because everyone says that they write themselves as their first character. So I can imagine it's been an interesting experience to grow kind of that first character that you wrote.
I mean, especially I think when I wrote the character, I wrote myself kind of. And so this is also not D&D, it's a German role-playing game, but just generally in D&D terms, you would be a ranger fighter with a bow, that type of stuff. And little bit socially inept, you could say, doesn't really work well in the city, perfect in nature, very protective of his friends, shy, you could say, yes. And with the character cycles, I don't think anyone has actually died on that campaign.
Wow,
that's crazy.
Wow, that's amazing.
You know what's interesting is I actually can picture. So like my picture is, I don't know how big your character is, but riding that elemental dragon and like shooting arrows into it until you break the ice off. That is like a really powerful visual image for me. And I can just imagine for you and the rest of your players, it was like it was a moment in your life, right? It was like, it wasn't real, but it was like something that you can recall as part of your history. And this is some of the things that we all seek out in these TTRPGs is, you know, our lives, certainly they provide highlights and lowlights and all this other stuff, but we can also have some of this stuff almost backfilled, additional moments of, you know, the hero's journey or amazing successes or amazing failures and all this other stuff that can be simulated, but feels fucking real. Like it's it's like an experience. You feel like the emotion is real in that moment, whether it's joy or pain or whatever.
Yeah, totally.
So I guess my point, I don't really have a point. My point is just that I really could understand why that was a really significant moment for you. And I do have one thing that I wanted to circle back to. Bodhi said, you know, there's some golden rules that you cover in session zeros. And I've been coming away and slowly building my own golden rules as a player. So it'd be interesting to get if you have any golden rules, like I don't know, the things that really stick in your mind before you step up as a DM or as a player. So I'll share mine just as an example. And these are ones that we've actually gotten from, I believe, from guests, and you don't even know what I'm going to say, but my first one
from other DMs,
yes,
literally, from Mark Arcusha, Dimples and Dice, bunch of people we've spoken to, yeah.
So the one for me that I have had to learn the hard way is to always find a way to say yes, and even at some point, if your character is pushing towards a no, that's fine. But if it starts impeding the game, always try to find a way to say yes to the larger story. So that's certainly a big one for me. Anything come to mind for you as far as a particular, whether you want to call it a golden rule or something important that you think about?
I believe that the most important thing is kind of adjacent or actually the same what you said. Find a way to buy into the game, buy into what you want to do, right? yes, it's totally fine if your character says no sometimes. That's playing your character. But if you're just there to be a little kid and cross your arms and say no to everything, no one's gonna play with you. That's just not fun. Like sometimes you just have to say, okay, well, this idea sounds stupid. Let's do it.
Yeah. Fully agree with that. Fully agree with that. And I think
you have any that are on your mind? Like
I mean, I think as a DM, I have different ones to as a player. As a player, I think my golden rule is make whoever I'm role playing with shine. Like really like pass them the torch in that moment. So whenever I'm having like one of these big moments, whether it is with the DM as well or like another player, just being like, really like serving it up for them to, smash it out the park, and in hopes that they will also be doing the same back to me, and we will then get some really beautiful interplay. And then as a DM, I think my big one, my really, really big one is slow down. Like I have it written on my DM screen. I have a piece of paper written that sits like on my computer in front of me, and I have one like off to the side, and all of them have like slow down and like giant writing. And it's just because I find, I'm not sure if you get this, Emil, when there's so much going on with rules and you're also focusing on wanting to make it cinematic with description, and you're wanting to, consider what the players are doing and think about, voices or this or that, music, whatever's going on. There's 100 things for a dungeon master to think about. When it comes to dealing with stuff and making decisions as a DM, I often find myself rushed because I want to give you guys the limelight. I don't want to be taking much of the limelight at all. I actually want you guys to have the limelight. Though many people don't believe DMs are like that. We actually really are. Most of us want you guys to be shining and us to be fucking periling, and struggling. But I think, when it does come down to it, it's about finding rhythms and finding beats, finding moments of breath to also consider what I'm going to do, as well as also allow dynamics within the plot, within like conversation. Abria Iyengar is one of my favorite DMs in terms of like her pacing is freaking unbelievable. I've never seen anyone like have like a whole table of players like waiting for like every syllable that's going to come out of her mouth, even if she stops, pauses, and like at that moment, typically in like other games I've seen, players might jump in and say things, but they're sat like eyes wide waiting to hear what she's got to say. And I think that kind of command as a DM and that kind of control is something that's really, really beautiful and really something that I inspire to have at some point. So I think those would be my two golden rules across it. But I'm not sure if that's something that you consider on your end about slowing down, if that's a problem you find you have to do.
I mean, I definitely agree with you that I often feel rushed and often feel that I have to get this quick and sometimes don't feel like I need to slow down, especially also when prepping my games. I say I only have these 2 hours to prep my game, and no, I still have 3 days to go to my session. I can just do it later. I have the time to think about this. And I think, especially letting yourself have the time, giving yourself the time to think about stuff through. That's why, for example, I don't like to do prep on the last day before the session or the day before the session, because I then only have the time in the session to change it. But if I do it a few days before, I can then change that again if I feel like, oh no, this idea is way better and my players are going to like it more. And
I like that.
One other big golden rule when I'm just at prep, when I'm talking about prep, is do not be afraid to throw out like 95% of all your prep you do.
Nice one. That is a nice one.
I believe that DMs should prep at least a little bit. That can be mental prep, like, okay, we are here at this point, like writing a recap of the last session. Okay, this is what happened. Where does this lead us? That can be enough for some people. But for me, for example, that is not enough. I need to have like a few locations prepped. My players are probably going to go to maybe an NPC or two, and just have, basically, I just need to get myself in the feeling, write some notes down, some bullet points that when I read them, get that feeling back of the session, and then I can run it. And I'm not afraid to then have a location prepped like a temple for my paladin, and then he doesn't go there with his visit to the town. I throw that out or just keep it for later. But the time I did was not wasted, in my opinion. I still immersed myself in my own setting, in my own world, and the own plot that I have. And that's good, because then I thought about it, and then my brain gets into this creative drive of thinking more about different stuff. Maybe when he went to this temple, he would have met a cleric that would have told him information X, and that information X could lead to something else. Now I have this lead, and I don't even need a temple for that lead. I just have the lead and still can put that lead somewhere else if I need to. The prep, the story behind that, the world is not lost.
I fully agree with that. It's something that took me a while to learn of, like, a couple things that like took me a while. Like for me now, I prep way less than I used to. Like when I first started prepping, I would write like dialogue pieces. I would write, you know, like heavy descriptions. I would write entire buildings, room by room, and like items in the room, and like it was way too much. And now I'm kind of in a similar headspace to you. I'll do my recap. Recap is always first. Then I go, cool, where do we go from here? Where are they going to visit? What? And typically I actually will write out like what encounters I think they're going to have. So I will be like, you know, if they're going to this location, you know, cool, I need to know what's going on in this building, who's there. So then I'm like you said, what NPCs are going to be there? What's kind of happening? What's the vibe? And I also kind of will give myself a little note of like, what can the players find here? Like, what are they gaining from going to this location, kind of thing? And something that took me so long to learn is that if your players don't go there, you can still keep that, and you can like either put it somewhere else in your world, or you can just keep it there for when eventually they do circle back around to doing that. But the throwing out 95% of your prep is something that I think weirdly every DM learns the moment they run that first session of Lost Mines, and shit just goes out of the window. They're just like, oh, what the just happened? I don't even know. Everything's a shit show now. And I think it's one of the most beautiful learning lessons, is everyone's like, yeah, you know, go do your prep kind of thing, go do this. And then eventually you're just like, oh my God, like I might as well have a couple of bullet points and some, like you said, some locations, some NPCs. And then from there, just wing it, because I'm going to have to wing it anyway. They're going to make me wing it anyway. So I might as well just be working on that. And almost that becomes the most important skill for the DM, is that ability to improvise and to pull out that stuff when you need to, on a consistent basis, more than like having amazing highs with your improv and then really bad lows. It's just about being really consistent with that improv and being able to do it frequently. Something I wanted to ask, you know, you do a lot of and you have a lot of amazing theories. I love the way that you think as a dungeon master. I love the way that you kind of position your games. And we spoke a little bit on the Unchapped podcast about some of your combat and like how you know, you make it so that your players have to move in combat, you know, even if they're circling around threatened space, you know, like almost like dipping and ducking like you would in standard combat. I know you're also a Kendo practitioner, which is freaking awesome. I've never actually met a Kendo practitioner in person in my life. So pleasure to meet you in person.
Nice.
Amazing. And I wanted to ask, how important is it for you when you are describing your combat with swords to make it, you know, are you doing Kendo technique, or are your like fighters or your characters using the Kendo technique that you learn? And when you do that as a DM, is it important to make it as realistic as possible?
Well, one of the things I learned in Kendo is that most of the swords you use are not slashing weapons, but like you could say bludgeoning weapons, but obviously they don't do bludgeoning damage. But when I have a Kendo sword, I don't slash, I hit. It's a fast hit. And the thing about that is, when I describe in combat, and I try to keep my especially when I have a lot of enemies, For example, just a simple group of bandits that have, I don't know, scimitars. And then I have like 8 bandits and only 4 players. I try to keep the bandit descriptions to a low because with 8 people, I don't have to describe everyone, but I don't want to take up too much time of my players. They should be the ones describing the cool stuff. My bandits are just there for them to do the cool stuff. But obviously, I will describe, especially also where the bandits hit, because in Kendo there are only 3 zones where you can hit, and that's the head, the hand, and the lower rib area under the ribs. That's the men, that's the kote, that's the do, and that's all you have. You basically also have an attack to the neck, or to the whatever this area is called.
Jugular like kind of area.
Like the thorax,
the throat, exactly. But that's very, very uncommon, actually. Only if you're dumb enough to put that area to make the area free, then you're actually getting hit there. And for Kendo, it's why do you do these free hits? Well, if you hit someone because this is actual sword, right? It's supposed to have a blade. You split the head. That's bad for people.
Yeah.
You hit the hand. Well, the hand is off now. They can't hold their sword anymore because it's a 2-handed sword. You hit them in the stomach. You cleave through them.
Yeah.
Dead. And thinking about what that hit is supposed to do, or what the hit, the sword or whatever weapon you do does, is very important in describing that for me. So if they're going for like the shoulder area, right? They would try to hit, and then you can describe. You feel as this hit goes in and sinks your shoulder down and leaves a good cleave, like 2 inches or 2 centimeters deep, and they pull the sword out again and go back, because that's another area you could hit in a sword fight. It's a joint. So even if you have heavy armor, here there needs to be something here that allows you to move this arm. And in describing, I think it's especially if you're having melee weapons, describing what that hit is supposed to do, why are they hitting there, and what the hit does as an impact is pretty important.
Do you know what? I'm right there with you. So obviously we're big martial arts fans, and as someone who does martial arts, it's it's funny when you see, like, I mean, for example, Marvel movies or things like that, where you see ridiculous fighting, and you're like, none of this is very accurate at all. But then, when you're talking about what you're talking about, I love what you just said about, you sink the blade into the shoulder, it cuts, a couple inches deep, you feel that like leaking of that warm blood, under your armor, it's realistic, it's visceral, it's fucking Game of Thrones. Do you know what I mean? It's not Marvel, where the heroes, like, where when someone gets blown up, no blood splatters, it's just like bits of clothes kind of flying through the air, It's like this shit actually happens, and stuff happens. And for us, especially with like martial arts and things like that in D&D, I really try and make the combat as realistic as possible. Like, if someone's going to shoot someone with a crossbow, cool, it's going to stick in them, and then that NPC is going to turn, react to you, and fucking snap that arrow off and fucking be ready to like come at you. Like, it's not something where it's like, again, like, I feel like that's something else as well, is like getting your injuries right as well as you go through combat on the bad guys, is like making it realistic. Because something else is, as a DM, if you go, cool, you hit his knee, you slice upwards and you like cut his ACL, and he goes down on one knee, kind of thing. You now have to consider this guy is now, okay, cool, probably has less movement now that he's got a fucked up leg. You've got to consider a bunch of other factors now that you've done this, and it's an accumulative thing that then, I remember I ran a one shot for a group that I play in, and the DM was just off for the week, and I ran this like basically dungeon with a mind flayer. And by the end of it, the mind flayer's arm is like hanging off. I believe he was like down on one knee. A bunch of his tentacles have been cut off. And like, I was like, though he is still trying to swing at you from down here, like he has such disadvantage. Like it's like if I could double disadvantage from this position, I would. Like, but it's one of those things where, yeah, it does accumulate, and it's important, in my opinion, to really do that. But what that comes with is, like you've said, you've had experience in Kendo, and you know, for at least for in my place when it comes to weapon fighting, I've at this point learned so much through watching Asian movies and going really into like deep culture where they are actually using weapons properly, as well as also then going and learning the stuff myself outside of that. I think if you really want to enhance that stuff, you really do need to go and almost invest a bit of time in you know, considering what a move is. You know, if your player goes, I want to kick them, you go, okay, what type of kick are you doing? Because that kind of matters. Like it's not just, you can't be like, oh, I'm gonna kick them, and be like, okay, roll to kick. Amazing. It's like, cool, okay, how are you kicking them in the chest? Are you kicking them in the side of the leg? Are you kicking them in the head? Because each of those has completely different outcomes dependent on whether you hit them or crit them or whatever. You know, it really is important to consider.
I think also as a player, it just colors things up a little bit more. If I'm a player and whether I'm trying to describe it, and if I don't have experience in martial arts or in weaponry or whatever, then I might be limited. But if the DM can pull out some real vivid imagery of what that injury looks like, it you know, makes it more real. And especially if, you know, if someone else in your party is deeply injured, you know, it somehow heightens the experience, heightens the urgency even more to act and to, you know, to try to find the solution. So yeah, I mean, we're both really, really on board with not just, you know, sort of combat description and making it as vivid as possible, but just the whole role play side of things. And I think making that as real as possible. I was just talking to my wife this morning, and this aspect of, you know, trying to make the people that are around you better. The analogy I use, if you're a basketball player, you're not Kobe Bryant, you're Steve Nash, right? You're passing the assists. But, you know, you're still on the all-star team as an assist player. And
such a specific reference.
And well, and look, Emil's German. Germans love basketball as well. I didn't use Dirk, but I did. But anyway, my point is though that interplay starts creating some of the fucking magic, right? And you can't force it. You cannot force the magic. And the magic sometimes comes back to you in a way that you weren't expecting, and you reply in a way that's just created a little bit of that magic. And it is not something that can be manipulated at all. It has to be, you know, passed around and enjoyed amongst the team. So, yeah, we're big proponents about, you know, whether it's combat or
realism.
Realism.
Yeah. Realism.
How about you guys in that game?
Because you play across multiple different games and multiple RPGs. I know you play like some Masquerade, some Vampire. I know you play, you know, I'm not sure the name of this German TTRPG that you're playing. What's it called?
It's The Dark Eye, or in German, Das Schwarze Auge. It's the biggest German role-playing game. It's basically low fantasy D&D, a little bit more. Magic is a little bit less common. There are only 4 races: human, half-elf, elf, and dwarves. There are all kinds of monsters. Dragons are... You also play a lot of more grounded realism type of game. You start off as, in D&D terms, as a level 3 adventurer maybe, and end at level 8.
Yeah.
That's the end game in this game. You like the HP bars go from 19 to 50. And monsters deal around 18 damage at the end of the game. And sometimes people still have only 19 HP at the end at the end level. HP doesn't scale with leveling up or something. It's a lot more it's a point-based system, a lot more easy, and it is a little bit more realistic because it has these wonderfully simple pain modifiers. When your HP bar gets basically split into 4 parts. You have an HP value. Let's say we take 40, which is simple to divide by 4. Every 10 HP you get one modifier, one pain. And that pain basically means every check you do has a -1 to it. And you roll a d20. For example, when we are rolling for an attack with a normal sword, you have a 15 to hit. You roll. You get hit. You take 10 damage. Now it's a 14 to hit for you. Now and then hit again 13, 12. And when you sink below 5, when you go to 5 or lower HP, you just go unconscious. You're not dead, but you go unconscious. As soon as you're at 0, there's no death saving throws. You just die in the matter of combat rounds equal to your constitution.
Wow.
I love that, because you're really having to strategize, almost to use your actions as a resource, as a limited resource, right? That is depleting itself throughout the course of either one. So do you recharge completely after a rest, or is it?
No,
it just is that
1d6 HP, nothing more. And when you have 50 HP, that takes a long time to recover, right? That's why this game also encourages, especially game masters, I think, after each chapter or campaign book you run, to have the players just restore to full, because just let them rest in the town for a week or something. It's easier to go into the new game with full HP, full resources, and all of that stuff. But yeah, and this game also basically, this is something I have a lot of hot takes or strong opinions about. D&D combat is very bland, and you can make it very fun if you want to. A lot of people, for example, don't want to. Like we guys talked about, descriptions are the best way, in my opinion, to make it more fun to play combat, because it's simple and it gives you enough to play with that, and then you can just put everything onto that if you want to. But I hate weapons in D&D. They are all so boring. There is nothing different between a battle axe and a longsword. Why?
That's a good point.
They are virtually the same, except for the price and the weight they have. Where is the difference between an axe and a sword?
It's something where they've definitely, it feels like they've lacked out a little bit on the combat in terms of the diversity, which is why sneak preview, we're hoping to bring a mixed martial arts class to D&D to allow for a more in-depth hand-to-hand combat system for players to use, but the weapon one is one we're yet to solve. I'll be honest with you. We've Tom and I have talked many times about like ways that we're like, but maybe we could do it like, no, it just doesn't fucking shit, you know. it doesn't quite line up, you know. It's just one of those things that they've kind of not missed a beat on, but something that is a little bit of a struggle. Talking about that, I mean, obviously we've got new editions and stuff coming out, you know, relatively soon. How are you feeling about, you know, the new stuff coming out in the next couple years and like this transition that's coming into new Dungeons and Dragons and what they're hoping to do with stat blocks and all that shit?
I didn't actually put too much thought into that as yet, but I watched the stream where they announced this, and I think they said no more spell slots for creatures or for the NPCs and monsters, and I'm like, yes, I have to keep track of so much stuff in combat already. Why give me more the spell slots? I just give me a few spells this monster can use X many times a day, and that's all I need. I don't need to track certain spells. So just say me this monster can use Fireball 2 times a day. I don't have to have 3 level 3 spell slots and these 3 spells. No, just say Fireball. That's enough. That's enough to make the combat fun.
Nice.
That's one of the big things. And I am very much still hoping. I know it probably won't happen because it was a design decision for 5e to make the weapons this bland and easy, because then weapon choice doesn't really matter except for flavor, which I totally get. That's okay in my opinion. That's okay for D&D. It fits the system. I can still complain about it. I can still say I don't like this at all. That's why I have different systems. That's why I could play Pathfinder or, for example, the Dark Eye, which has very fun weapon traits. They are realistic, right? When you shoot a bow in close combat, that's gonna suck for you. You're not allowed to parry when the other one hits you because try to parry a sword with your bow and try using it after that. That won't happen. A spear user would never let someone that can use a dagger into their range because they're not idiot. They would easily be able to keep the user with this simple knife away with their 2 meter pole easily, and that's what the system pays attention to. A user with a dagger has like a -8 to their attack against a spear user, which is virtually impossible to hit.
Yeah,
and the system also makes a great deal of active defense, which in D&D you only have AC. You don't have anything else. You have the saving throws for spells and effects, but you only have the AC for attacks. This system says, well, you have to dodge actively. And every time you take the dodge action, your chance gets depleted. So you have a dodge modifier, I think of 8 normally or something with a normal character. Every time you dodge, that gets reduced by 3 for that combat round. So you can only dodge so many times, right? If 3 people want to hit you, one of them is probably gonna do it.
Yeah. Do you know what? It feels more grounded. And it's something I personally as well, like we're working with someone called NPC Encyclopedia at the moment on creating our NPCs, and at the moment we're building a setting hopefully to complement all the NPCs that we're releasing as well. And I'm working on like the like sky portion, which is like all in floating islands and shit like that. And he's working more on the like land portion. And I'm super much like very much like you in this German TTRPG, and of that I'm very low fantasy. Like I don't need Feywilds, I don't need fucking elemental planes, I don't need, you know, stuff like that, because I want to run it like a political like bloodbath based in the world that I'm basically in, and I think that's kind of how I am. Where contrasting Tony, NPC Encyclopedia, is very high fantasy. Things very much like, oh, and there's angels and demons and gods and like all the, I'm like, whoa, like that's wild, you know, kind of thing. And I think finding that you know, like, I guess finding your niche and really going down that route is really important. It's really, really, really freaking important. And I think, you know, you're very clear on like, you're like, weapons should be the way they should be. And like other people are like, yo, man, I just want my barbarian to swing his sword and hit things. So like, I think it comes down to very much what your like style is and what you're looking for. And also the beautiful thing about that is D&D, though a very expansive system and one that does have a lot of customizable options now that we have so many books and so many source books and whatnot, things like Pathfinder, things like, you know, this German TTRPG, and there's a bunch of others out there. What's it called? Mutants and what's it called? Thank you. And there's hundreds of TTRPGs that are actually a little bit more tailored to maybe what you want, as opposed to having to try and manipulate Dungeons and Dragons into something that it really might not be. For example, if you love roleplay more, Vampire might be way more up your kind of like street. If you are a heavy combat person, you know, you might want to find something where it is a lot more based on fighting people and like getting in there and maybe a bit more of a crunchy combat system that allows for a lot more options and less when it comes to roleplay. It's about exploring and finding what is best with you. And do you know what? It's something, talking about exploring and stuff. I know that you and Niels talk a lot about this in your podcast, about the exploration pillar of D&D, and you guys have talked about this a lot. I actually really love, you know, because up until this point, I have not dealt with incumbents too much, or things like rationing mountains and stuff, because my players have typically found themselves within cities and things like that, and not crossing wildernesses too much at this point, or wildlands or things like that. I really love the method in which you go about doing it, and the way that you track your stuff. And I wanted to ask you, why is that something that's so important, that exploration pillar in your game? And like, why does that lead such a big part of what you do?
Well, first for D&D, right? It's one of the three pillars that got just decimated in 5e, in my opinion. There isn't much mechanics behind it, and there isn't much anything behind it. But I think just doing this simple stuff, right? Tracking ammunition, tracking encumbrance, tracking rations, making sure that your players pay attention to this. This is very important, right? I don't want my players to feel like, for example, when they were in the wilderness and had to survive because they didn't plan for it, and had to find food and shelter and all of that stuff, right? That was fun. And the thing is, what I don't want to do is not make them aware that this is something they should pay attention to, and then make them pay for not paying attention to it, right? It's something we discussed in session 0, right? We talked about it earlier, that's so important to have that discussion, because when I tell them, hey, tracking ammunition is important, doing this, they watch out for those things. Every time they're in a tavern and look at their inventory, okay, do I have enough rations? Are we going out tomorrow? Should I buy a ration? That's a talk they have in game. It takes like 1 or 2 minutes for them to buy a ration. But then when they go out, they have a ration, and they are also very creative with what they then can do, right? I mean, it starts with the very basic stuff of having a rope, because let's be real, you need a rope in the wilderness. When you want to run your players through a forest, a mountain range, make sure they have a rope, because there's nothing worse than having your players sit around on a mountain and say, well, we don't have a rope, we can't get down here. Like, where is that then fun for the dungeon master? Because your players are not going to do anything. So yeah, the simple stuff, making your players aware of the simple stuff. Make sure you have the equipment, make sure you have the rations, and then they will get creative with that. That's one of the things I give them. Something, you need to watch out for your ammunition, you need to watch out for your rations. They will make plans. They will, and that's kind of how I put the exploration pillar back in. I make sure that these things matter, because a lot of people say this is like this little number crunching, I can just put it that away. Yes, you can, but that also means that you take away the fun of surviving. Right? There's little anecdote. There's a YouTube project in Germany right now from a survival YouTuber that has basically 7 survival YouTubers, his friends, going into the wilderness of Sweden, 7 days, only 7 items with them, complete isolation. And it's fun for them, right? They are in the wilderness. They are trying to survive. They have their tent. They have their sleeping bag. Maybe their cooking pot, right? Those items matter, and making those items matter makes then, for example, also the rest matter. For example, I have a homebrew rule that makes resting harder. I say, like, right, we all do this. Okay, make a survival check to find a shelter, or to find a good place to rest. And then that doesn't actually matter, right? I just outright tell my players, if the survival check is not good enough, well, you don't have a long rest now. You only get the short rest from this. And now you will have to try to either improve your resting spot through clever role play or through your gear. And that's why they take the good gear. They take good cooking equipment with them, so they don't have to care about the food anymore, or at least not that much.
Wow. Do you know, and it adds something that, like, dude, like, first of all, that, like, as a DM, it's a level that I aspire to reach with immersion for my players. I'm not quite there yet, which is one of my favorite things as a DM is being humbled. Actually, it's something that I'm really starting to enjoy as a DM, is when you meet another dungeon master and they're like, oh yes, and I do this, and you're like, whoa, that's fucking cool. I like that. Wow, I need to step up my game a little bit. I need to, like, evolve a little bit. And I think that everything you just spoke about is one, awesome, two, a great way to immerse the players in a way that is on a whole nother level. And I love that you're like, fuck it, how am I going to reinsert this pillar so that, you know, we're actually supporting the structure of D&D that these pillars are standing on. It's not freaking some lopsided with like combat carrying all the freaking weight and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Furthermore, talking about, you know, like cohesion and like immersion and I guess just
it's just one of those flawless
transitions.
Yeah.
Exactly. I was about to say,
I'm sensing it right now.
Thanks. I was about to say, talking about teamwork and working well together. You and Niels, how did that happen? How did you guys come together? And why after nearly 40 episodes do you still do this with Niels?
Well, first of all, Niels is a lovely person. That's why I'm still doing it with him. I couldn't think of someone else to do it with, really.
Incredible.
No, the thing is, I don't think Niels and I actually went into how we met in depth. We said we met at a birthday from a friend, right? We didn't go to the same school, but I did go to the same school as one of Niels's friends. I was invited to one of their birthdays, and Niels played a lot of Magic the Gathering back then, and that's how a few of my friends connected with him.
Okay.
The years went on. We met at birthdays. We played poker. We played whatever at that birthday, right? And at some point, then Niels started playing TTRPGs. I was already playing at that time. My friends and I were already playing at that time, and at some point, right, one of my friends kind of came very close to that friend group of our mutual friend that invited us to the birthdays and Niels, and had TTRPG sessions with them, I think. And they were basically a second friend circle. And then at some point, one of my friends said, "Hey, D&D is currently the quick start rules are free. I will go to a gaming store and buy one of the books." Bought Lost Minds of Vandelver and played one session for a few friends, for two friends and me. Next, like literally on the way home, and this friend is only 10 minutes away from me from here, right? That walk isn't long. I made the decision, next week I'm gonna run an adventure as well, Horde of the Dragon Queen. And then I looked for players the next day after and invited the friend that invited me to D&D. We were playing at his house, so it would only make sense that he would play as well. His girlfriend at that time, two other friends of mine, and where we need a fifth player. And then he was like, "Hey, I can invite Niels." Invited Niels. Niels played the first session with us. And then it actually again stopped. But after that, Niels started DMing D&D as well. And then we met at one of the other birthdays. I was wearing a Critical Role jacket. Niels commented on that, and that's how we got talking, and we talked like 3 hours D&D. And after that, we more and more connected through D&D and talked. We are also both gamers. We gamed a lot, and then met for like Sea of Thieves or something, played a bit. And at some point then in January this year, I asked him, "Hey, do you want to do a podcast with me?" He was instantly on board, and we set to work. And then February, the 7th of February, we released the first episode, and we're still doing it today. And it was up until now a very fun ride, and I hope it continues.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I certainly love about it that I think is unique, and I think you have a particular perspective. You're kind of up in the thin air of TTRPGs, and I'll explain what I mean. Not only do you have very sort of specialized guests that you guys get into a lot of different discussions about things that inform you, but you're also experienced players, and you're also very, very active in the community. So you have a perspective that, you know, I could spend all of my time in one of those areas, right? But you have more of a holistic view of the TTRPG community. So with that in mind, like for me, at any given time, I'm thinking about, you know, let's say the most reflective thought for me. So I'll give you an example. I might be thinking about, well, I wonder what 6E is going to be like, you know, or I might be thinking about, you know, we're going to think about streaming. So how's music going to work in that? Or how, you know, these sort of broader thoughts about D&D or TTRPG. With your reference point of being up in the thin air and having all of these different gatherings of information and of knowledge. What is your current right now? What is the thing that you're thinking about most that intrigues you a little bit about TTRPGs, D&D, whatever? That, you go to bed, you think about it, you wake up, you're excited about it, that type of thing.
I think one of the things that intrigues me a lot since, I don't know, 2 years, around that time when I started playing D&D, is just connecting with people, but learning that there are more systems out there, right? I played the Dark Eye for 6 years, basically straight. I had a different German system, but I only knew the German market for TTRPGs. And those are the only 2 systems, which one is Contact, which is a shit system. And I ran that for 6 years, and I don't know why. but I kept going at it. But it's one of the systems. Combat can also be way too granular, way too crunchy. And I'm talking sci-fi combat having a range modifier for every shot you take with a weapon. And that is like X multiplied by minus 0.75%. And you have to do like 2 minutes of math for you to fire one shot, and you fire 10 in a round. The initiative in that system was so bad because everyone rolled for a certain value, then they had a value. That value was like 30 to 70 on that scale. And then every action has a certain number of action points associated with it.
Yeah.
Now comes the fun part. You can place, for example, a militia or a military robot right at the top, like 70 points. And the medic, that was my first introduction to that system. I was the medic, my friend was the combat robot. He had a 70, and I had like a 40 or something. And I was the second one on initiative. He had 30 action points to do something. Firing anti-air missile rocket takes 10 action points. He could have obliterated my character 10 times over before I would have even been able to dodge. Who designs that? But it goes into the direction and then learning, okay, yes, there's D&D. I knew D&D existed back then, right? I knew it was the biggest system, never played it, realized, hey, this is very fun, even though it has its flaws, especially with the combat simplifying for me, which is the one big thing. But then I learned there's Pathfinder. Then I learned that there is Vampire and the whole world of darkness. Then I learned Powered by the Apocalypse, Blades in the Dark, and all of and then also indie systems, right? Titanomachy RPGs, Caltrops Core is a gaming engine you can write your own systems for, which are like only 4 to 5 pages long. I mean, I learned that there's like an ocean of TTRPGs out there that I want to try out, and that's one of the big things that I love about TTRPGs and think about all the time is the amazing systems that I get to play and try out. And I think the best thing every dungeon master or game master, because dungeon master is only D&D, right, is to try a different system, to at least read a rule book, right? You don't even have to play it, but I think, for example, one of the big things I learned this year is from the Witcher system. Everything they have in their GM section is very interesting. Like all of these things I did before, but they finally made a little bit more sense because they explained it well. Yeah. One of the big things is don't make it weird, right? This world is bloody, brutal, but this doesn't mean that you as a dungeon master or game master have to have this power fantasy of you being the god of destruction and killing your players, characters, and all of that stuff. Just have fun in this gruesome world and don't make it weird. Don't try to put your players into weird positions that they don't enjoy. Right? It's easy to think about this, but they put it into words, and that's something I really loved. And looking at different systems, what they do, how they do it, and taking from them. That's why D&D doesn't have, for example, such a fate or a hero point mechanic where you get to re-roll a dice or something. I took that from the Dark Eye, where you have these fate points you can use to enhance your roll, re-roll, or do something with your dice. There's a lot about these rules, but I just took this and made my own rule and said, I want this for D&D. I want my players to feel just that little edge of special above the normal people in this world, because they are special. They are my players, they are my friends, and I love them, and they are playing with me, right? I just want them to feel fun. I want them to have fun, and this adds to that, in my opinion, giving them that special bit that makes them stand out.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I mean, I think, you know, just using that word special, when we decided to ask you to come on our podcast, and I mentioned it in the introduction, we've just mentioned it just now as well, you're very involved in a really special community that we all feel, you know, deeply about. And it'd be interesting to get your perspective of what the TTRPG community, especially on Twitter, I guess, maybe even Discord, what I guess how you got into it. And you know, you're certainly a prime mover in the community as far as we're concerned. What's your perspective on it?
First of all,
it wasn't. By the way, it wasn't as good of a transition as Bodhi's, but I'm trying.
It was good enough. It was good enough. Yeah. Not bad. Well, first of all, thank you for calling me community leader or community big person. I never consider myself big, but that's probably also my imposter syndrome. So,
yeah.
How I got into it, that's quite fun, because this podcast wouldn't exist if it weren't for a certain video game. I had a Twitter account, my personal account, for like 12 years at this point, just to follow esports, video games, music, actors, German YouTubers, every person that I want to have updates on, right? And at some point I followed the game developer, who's also a TTRPG creator, Zine from Sword and Quill. And what Zine is a video game developer, and they developed a game called Code 7 with their studio, which is a text-based hacking adventure. Very fun indie game. And I followed them, and at some point I think Zine retweeted a D&D podcast, Sword and Quill, at that time. And I checked this out because I was randomly on Twitter and found this and checked this out. And I knew I watched Critical Role at that time, and I knew that there were different, that there was like Dimension 20 and High Rollers, only the big people though. I didn't knew that there was an indie scene in these actual play podcasts, really.
Yeah.
Saw this and was like, okay, this is interesting. And then after that, I started basically using Twitter every day, interacting with the TTRPG community, and I realized that I became a member of that community and had like, then this was November last year, like it's around 1 year now from today. And then like in December, I realized, okay, I have 100 followers. How did I do that? And then I realized, because I interacted with people, I talked to people, I gave my opinion on things, I was respectful, I made my own posts, and then that snowballed. And more. And on January 6th, I asked Niels, do you want to do a podcast with me? Because we wanted to contribute to this awesome community we found. And then in February, we did. And now we're here. And yeah, I just stumbled upon one time. Yeah, exactly. I had one person already. One person basically pulled me into this community without knowing, and now I'm here.
Yeah. Do you know what? It's so weird how similar our kind of intro to that is as well. You know, it's one of those things where we got roped in from. I actually watched like an indie stream, though they're not an indie channel. They don't like, it's not super known that they do D&D. But the Corridor Digital guys used to have on their Node channel a D&D stream. So I started watching that, and then we got into Acquisitions Incorporated. And from there, you know, like, I mean, watching any of the live Acquisition Incorporated games at PAX is enough to get anyone kicking to play some D&D. And we basically like kind of got involved. And like I said, you know, I picked up the Twitter account for us and started following some people and seeing what was going on. Your guys, DoubleDM, being one of those early accounts that I kind of started following. And it was so interesting. Like you said, it's such a lush community full of people who, you know, want to bring. It's very rare you meet someone in the TTRPG community that's like, I want to get from this community so much. Like everyone is like, I'm creating because like I feel like I have something to give this community. Like I feel like I can enhance this community in some way and do something, you know, for this community. And it's really nice how much all of that has been like brought together and just brought in. And it's, you know, though I'll say this, I found a very toxic side of the TTRPG community that are like the gatekeepers and typically the old school players who are a bit like, you know, hating on newer people is typically what I've found. But other than that, it seems to be one of the safest spaces on the internet for people of all, you know, genders, races, nationalities, religions, you know, everything. And I think it's so rare in life, especially in, you know, 2020, when, you know, we've got so much, we're being made aware of so much injustice that is going on because we're so connected at this point. It's nice to have a space where it feels like people really care about each other. I wanted to ask, because obviously with the TTRPG community, and you said, you know, you're on Twitter, you know, interacting with people, and I know, you know, of an average, you know, month or week, you're playing and running somewhere between like, you know, four to 5 games you've said in the past. How do you like legitimately, because I you know, I have my girlfriend and I have like, you know, TV shows that I want to watch and like skateboarding that I like doing and like and shit that I like doing outside of all of this. You are so active within the Twitter sphere, so active within things like the Unchapped, you know, Discord and places like that, and, you know, Hope for TTRPG and places like that, you know. How do you balance that life stuff? Because you're creating, you're playing, you're prepping, you're interacting, you're supporting. When are you breathing? Like, when do you get a chance?
The secret to that is no sleep. No, I think it's very important when you want to create, when you want to in the TTRPG space. Like in our latest episode, one of our guests said people can smell if you're just here to sell them stuff, right? You need to connect. You need to be an actual member of the community. And I think that's so true, right? I got into the Hope for TTRPGs Discord as, hey, I have a podcast in like a month or two, and I want to form connections for that. I didn't want to form them on a business level. I just wanted to connect with people. That's where I met a lot of people. Maka, I know you guys. I know we know each other through Maka more or less. We've talked on chat together the first time. Maps and quests, but generally, so many people I've met through the Hope for TTRPGs Discord, or just generally the community aspect that this community, the special aspect this community has of generally being friendly, like you said. Sure, there are always bad apples. Sure, there are always people that have differing opinions from us, and that's fine. I don't have a big problem with people playing the game their style. It's not for me. I can still learn from them. There are very good, like there are very cool people that still play AD&D second edition or something, and the older styles that are very interesting to talk to because they have so many differing opinions from you, but they're respectful about it, right? Kind of circling also back to Kendo is one of the few martial arts where you don't have any insignia of your rank, right? This paper right behind me here, this is my certificate that I have one Kendo rank.
Yeah.
But I don't have anything on my sword, on my armor, or anywhere on my person when I'm fighting. Because experience doesn't matter, really. The only thing you're supposed to do is give your best. Be respectful of your opponent. You give your best, you fight with them, and if you're way better than them, then you teach them, right? Yeah. If you're degrading yourself and saying, well, I'm just gonna try something new on you, that's not gonna be fun. That's not gonna be respectful and good sportsmanship in Kendo. You're supposed to treat everyone with the same respect, and the first thing you do about that is eliminate anything that elevates that other person above you. It's why I have no problem talking to someone that has only like 20 followers. They have the same value to me that someone that has 100,000 or something. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, dude, I freaking love that, and that's why you're at the you're one of the leaders in this community and
sitting at the table.
I was gonna say, have a seat at the fucking table. That's exactly freaking why. Do you know what? I'll tell you what. Something that and like just being vulnerable and disclosing some shit. Like I definitely feel at times like not imposter syndrome, but like being like, fuck, man. I hope people don't think we're here to just sell them stuff. Like something that I definitely struggle with because of just like one, dyslexia, and two, I pretty much hate social media outside of having to now that we do this in terms of content creation, social media is the platform for all of this. I typically don't have mountains of interaction. For example, like in the Unchapped, Discord, I find so much is happening and so much conversation happens in like 20 minutes. I'll look back and be like, okay, well, that's kind of
that boat sails.
I was gonna say, yeah, like the idea I had to say for a point that was made 300 messages ago is now gone. And like I often do feel bad that I hope that we don't come across like that. And again, it's something that I'm always striving to. Like I respect Maka so much for the amount that he is available to this community, like just making himself available to talk to interact with, to share people's content and boost them and to help people out. Like I'm perplexed at how much time he has for like everyone else almost. Do you know what I mean? And I guess it's something that I definitely aspire to be more like that. I try and get on Twitter, at least once a day and interact with some stuff, comment on some people's stuff, and like as many things as I can as I'm like running down my news feed and like stuff that I'm interested in and give people that support. But yeah, man, like I respect the those of you within the community, like yourself, Maka, Abyssal is another one, Maps and Quest, people who are just constantly giving that love and support and being available to people. I can't even explain how much I respect that and envy the ability to the drive to do that kind of thing, because it's not something that I have.
I also say two things
as much.
We appreciate it from where we sit, but we also were really grateful that we have maybe not a seat at the table, but a seat at one of the tables, let's say.
Yeah.
And we really feel grateful for that we've been in sort of invited into to participate in the community and our style and how we how we do things, whether we're doing our podcasts or NPCs or trying to tie in some MMA stuff into the conversation as well. I mean, we feel grateful, and it's one of the things that this is hard. All this stuff is hard, right? Like being and to be able to have just those moments on a self promo Saturday where you're interacting with people and they're saying some stuff that's lovely about your stuff, and you're saying those moments actually count, and they actually get you through the rest of the week sometimes. So
hell yeah, when like I had a moment recently where someone left us a beautiful comment on Reddit, basically like, hey, I downloaded a monster that you guys released, and I showed it to my players. This is how they dealt with this monster. This is the like strategy they came up with, and this is how it went down. It is now like a canon part of our world.
Nice.
I legitimately had like a little cry, like I legitimately had like a little cry and was like, I can't tell you how much that means to me that someone is enjoying what we're giving to the community, and that people like give a fuck about what we're doing. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's one of those things that really like makes us want to continue bringing to this group and continue contributing the stuff that we do. And like I said, I think it goes without saying that DoubleDM is truly a staple for a lot of us within the TTRPG community, and for a lot of new DMs and for anyone watching this, I can't recommend it enough. If you need to learn, if you want to go dip your toes in and understand, think about things. And then if you're a veteran DM that needs to be reminded of shit, or you're still working out some stuff, it's also amazing and a great podcast to check out. So I strongly recommend that. On our end, I just wanted to hand it over to you and say, you know, as we round this one out, if you wanted to like plug any projects that you're working on at the moment, if you want to, you know, plug some socials,
any final thoughts?
Shout out your grandma. I don't know, like anything that you want to.
Kendo instructor.
I was gonna say, yeah.
Dude, you know what? I love that you've held on to that Kendo sword for the entire podcast. That is awesome. It's just been there ready.
I'm also freaking terrified as well. Like, I never want to get on your bad side. Someone get like a little bop on my head from a wooden stick. Fucking son of a bitch.
I mean, one of the things we are taught, obviously, is not use the sword against someone that's not ready against you. Normally, right? Do not use your skills against someone that does not deserve your skills.
This is true, but if I'm being an asshole to you, I feel like you deserve a good bop on the head to me. You're justified with a boop.
First of all, one thing I wanted to say as a final thought about social media, especially, is often enough people you will see people like Abyssal, Maps and Quest, Maka, maybe even me or any other big account tell you to post more, tell you to do this and that, and be interactive and positive. Yes, all of that is true. But one thing is always don't take advice just blindly, because when I started posting more, because I didn't do that at the beginning, and I kind of walked into that and made and posted more and more in small steps. Mm-hmm. If you feel overworked with social media, please stop. Please don't try to overwork yourself with this, because it would be way worse if you overwork yourself for social media and your project has to suffer for that, because your project is what you should focus on.
Dude, not just your project, like other parts of your life.
100%, right? Sleep, eat, take time for sports, recreational activities with friends, anything. Don't try to make this too big of your life. When you have the time, schedule content. Make the posts like all on Monday when you have the time for an hour, and then don't care about it for the rest of the week, and instead of just popping in and being positive, right? Try to always come in with positive, right? Nobody wants social media is a negative place. That's a lot of what people say, right? And that's true, because a lot of people amplify that negativity. Don't try to be that amplifier. Just bring positivity back. Interact with people, like you said, whenever you have the time. Don't force yourself to do it. Like, right, I do a lot, but that's only because I have the luxury of working from home. Even without a pandemic going on, I had the luxury of that. So that's easy for me, but other people don't. So don't try to force yourself into that.
Do you know what? Quickly, that was said masterfully as someone who sits as a representative of the TTRPG community. Look at that, just beautiful advice. Look at like balanced advice going. You know, a great way to do it. Lots of interaction. However, everything in moderation, and that's, Emil, why you are who you are. That's why you kick ass.
Well, I mean, just to build on that, like, you could be wild, like you could spend all your time on Twitter and build an audience and all this other stuff. If the rest of your life is shit because of that, it's not worth it. It's not fucking worth it.
Yeah.
You know, so you gotta bring that success into like a very well-rounded life of friends and family and like other activities and hobbies and other life experiences. So thank you so much for saying that, because it is super, super important for those of us that are in this space.
We can all be the David Goggins every now and then and you know, go 100% and, you know, be that demon. Is it David Goggins?
Yeah. He does the
I was gonna say he's
the extreme marathon.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's the crazy dude who's like, if you're not working, you're not yeah. You know, like, we don't all have to be that, but we can be that sometimes. But it's about finding the rhythm, finding the beat. Sorry, back over to you for shouting any projects out or anything that you got out, social medias, that kind of shit.
Well, I'm from the DoubleDM podcast, as we already talked about. People can find us on social media at DoubleDM Pod. You can find all our podcast feed on any podcasting platform under just DoubleDM. I am also part of a project called Why Your World Matters, which is a world building panel where creators with different voices and different backgrounds try to just come together and talk about world building, because we believe world building is something everyone can do and no one does it wrong as long as they're having fun with it. And especially for TTRPGs, there come a lot more aspects into that, but that's something a little bit too much to discuss for this end of this episode, obviously. I want to shout out my grandma who broke her arm yesterday, but is fine at least.
Oh shit! Holy fuck! Holy shit! Grandma, you need to stop riding BMX bikes. We told you, Grandma. It's time to put the bike away.
Put your kendo sword down for 6 weeks and allow your arm to heal up, Grandma. Don't worry, Emil will be there for you to teach him the next lesson.
I was just saying, Grandma, Emil is ready to spar with you, but you need a bit of healing time right now.
Take your long rest. No, really, she's fine. My grandma's great. Sure was a shock to her hear that she broke her arm, but she's fine. She's doing good. She's not just having fun playing cards with her husband or something. I don't know.
I was gonna say one-handed playing cards. Incredible. Hey, this has been such an honor to talk to you. Like I said, I've been really excited to kind of get into some of this with you and understand, a bit more of your perspective. And obviously, we'd love to have you back on in the future to do so. But yeah, thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure. We've been Homie and the Dude. We're the father and son TTRPG MMA podcasting team and destination where you can get NPCs, magic items, monsters, all that kind of stuff with incredible new unique features and abilities and incredible art that you should probably use for tokens and shit. I don't know, like stuff like that. But otherwise, guys, thank you for checking out Homie and the Dude and this awesome podcast. It's been such a pleasure today, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Catch you in the next one. Thanks, Emil.
Thanks, Emil.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching Homie and the Dude today. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit us with the Holy Trinity. Go follow us on Twitter, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and like the Facebook. It's the best way that you can help us out at the moment. Hope you have an awesome day. Thanks for watching, guys.